Hello, students. To really understand the rise of nationalism in Europe, which is such an important part of your syllabus, we first need to take a step back in time. We need to imagine a Europe that looks very different from the one we see on maps today. A Europe before the idea of a nation even existed. This background is absolutely crucial.
So here is our plan for today. We'll start by picturing a world without countries as we know them. Then we will look at the map of old Europe, which was like a patchwork of states. We'll also explore the huge empires that were made up of many different peoples. And finally, we will understand why this old system had to change.
All right, let's begin with our first section, a world without countries. We're going to see how people's idea of who they were, their identity, was completely different back then.
Just take a moment to think about this. A map of Europe, but there is no single country called Germany, no unified Italy, no Switzerland. It probably sounds a bit strange, right? But that was the reality in the middle of the 18th century.
You see, the idea of a national identity simply did not exist for most people. A person living in the area we now call Italy wouldn't say, "I am Italian." No. Their world was much smaller. Their loyalty, their sense of belonging was to their village, maybe their region, or to the king or duke who ruled over their small piece of land.
So, if people's loyalties were so local, what did the map of Europe actually look like? Well, that brings us to our next section. The map was like a patchwork quilt, and the reason for this was something called political fragmentation.
Let's understand this term properly. Political fragmentation. It means exactly what it sounds like. A large area, instead of being one country, was fragmented or broken up into many small and independent pieces. These could be small kingdoms, duchies, or cantons, and each one had its own ruler and its own territory. This is a very important concept to remember.
Now just look at this map. This will make it very clear. Look closely at the area where we find Germany and Italy today. It's not one solid block of color, is it? Instead, you see a collection of many small, different colored states. It really looks like a patchwork, a jumble of little pieces. This is what political fragmentation looked like.
So, to summarize the difference very clearly, Europe back then was divided into all these small kingdoms and duchies, each with its own ruler who was autonomous, meaning they were in charge of their own affairs. But Europe now, as you know, is made up of unified nation-states where people feel a shared identity and are under a single government.
Okay, so we had small fragmented states, but that's only one part of the story. On the other hand, large parts of Europe were dominated by massive empires, which we call multinational dynastic empires.
Especially in Eastern and Central Europe, you would find these huge empires. They were ruled by what we call autocratic monarchies, basically very powerful rulers with absolute control. And the people living inside these empires were not all the same. They were multinational, meaning they were from many different backgrounds. And the best example for us to study is the Habsburg Empire.
Just have a look at the diversity within this one empire. The Habsburg Empire was truly a patchwork of peoples. For example, the aristocracy often spoke German. There were provinces where people spoke Italian. In Hungary, the majority spoke Magyar. And then you had Polish-speaking nobles. On top of that, there were so many different peasant communities, Bohemians, Slovaks, Croats, all with their own languages and cultures.
So this brings up a very important question. With all these different people, speaking different languages, having different cultures, what was the one thing that held them all together? Well, this quote says it all. It wasn't a shared identity. The only thing binding them was a common allegiance, a shared loyalty to one person, the emperor.
Here is a simple way to think about this. Imagine the empire is a very big school. The emperor is the principal. But every single classroom in this school has students who speak a different language and have their own unique culture. The only thing they all have in common is that they report to the same principal. That is basically what a multinational empire was like.
So now we have a clear picture of old Europe, a mix of small, fragmented states and these huge, diverse empires. But this whole system, this old order, as we call it, it could not last forever. So now we ask, why was this system so unstable?
This is really the main problem. With so much difference, different languages, different cultures, different peoples all living side by side or under one ruler, how could you possibly create a feeling of real political unity? How could you make them all feel like they were part of the same team?
And the simple answer is, in the long run, you couldn't. The differences were just too big.
Just being loyal to a faraway emperor was not a strong enough glue to hold such different peoples together permanently. The foundation of this system was just not strong enough. And it was precisely because of this problem, this fragmentation and lack of unity, that a powerful new idea began to take hold. This idea was nationalism. People started to think in a new way. What if our unity is not based on a king, but on a shared language, a shared culture, a shared history? This was the beginning of the idea of the nation-state.
And that leaves us with a final, very interesting question to think about as we move forward. How can an idea, just an idea of a shared culture or a common language, become so powerful that it could unite millions of people who had never even met each other? That is the amazing story of the rise of nationalism in Europe.